In this segment, we're going to be talking about pteridophytes, which consist mostly of ferns. Now, when we talk about ferns, most of us think about this large frondy plant. And this large frondy plant, this is one single frond from that plant, would be the dominant stage. In this case, the dominant stage is the sporophyte. So let's go ahead and start there with the sporophyte, our dominant stage. Now again, I like to write the dominant stage on top, simply for reference. So let's go ahead and put our sporophyte on top. Sporophyte is going to be 2N, meaning 2 copies of each chromosome. And the other stage of the pteridophytes, or ferns, is going to be the gametophyte. Now the gametophyte is a very small structure. It actually looks like a heart-shaped structure, and it's approximately 1/2 centimeter across. So it's literally about half the size of your pinky nail. Oftentimes it's overlooked, but it exists, and it is part of the pteridophyte life cycle. Now, the sporophyte is going to go ahead and produce spores. And the spores are actually produced, if we look at this frond, if you look at the underside of this frond, you will see little brown dots. These little brown dots are referred to as sori. So they're referred to as sori, S-O-R-I, or soris for short. And these sori actually produce the spores. And not every frond produces sori. Only a couple of the fronds will produce the sori. So if you're ever out, take a look at the fronds, turn over the fronds so you see the underside, and usually you'll find 1 or 2 or even more that contain these sori. The gametophyte is going to produce the gametes. Now with ferns, a single gametophyte usually contains both the male and female reproductive organs, meaning both the archegonia and antheridia. So the sporophyte is going to produce spores. And these spores, because we're going from 2N to N, are going to be produced through the process of meiosis. And all these spores are going to be genetically different from each other and from the parent from which they came. The spores will then be released into the air. These spores are going to fly through the air until they find a suitable habitat. Many will not, but some will. When some of the spores do find a suitable habitat, they will grow into the gametophyte. Now we're going from N to N, so when we go from N to N, we're going to use the process of mitosis. And our gametophyte is, again, the small heart-shaped structure often overlooked on the ground. This small heart-shaped structure actually has roots. It does have vascular tissue, so these are true roots. And up top here, usually right around here and right around here, are going to be our male and female reproductive organs. Okay. This might be the antheridia. And down here might be the archegonia. Again, the antheridia produce flagellated sperm. And the archegonia produce eggs. Now, think about the pteridophytes, the ferns, and also think about the moss we talked about previously. These plants are only found in damp areas. And one of the reasons that is because they produce flagellated sperm. These sperm require droplets of water in order to swim from the male reproductive organ to the female reproductive organ. You're not going to see these guys growing out in the middle of an open field where it's really dry because they can't reproduce there. There's not enough water, even in the morning when there's some dew on the ground, there's not enough water for those sperm to swim to a nearby plant. And that's another thing to keep in mind. Just because this one gametangia, or this one gametophyte, has both male and female organs, doesn't mean that the sperm swim right to the egg here. There are barriers in place. The sperm typically are going to swim to a nearby gametophyte that is not genetically related to it. And they're going to fertilize that egg. And that increases genetic variation. And that's very important because we want genetic variation because that is going to allow the species to change in a changing environment. So in terms of an evolutionary sense, very, very important. Now our gametophyte is going to produce gametes. And the gametes are going to be sperm and egg. So we'll go ahead and we'll write that down. Sperm, egg, both of which are N. And both of these are going to be produced through the process of, we're going from N to N, so it's going to be mitosis. The gametes will then come together, and again, we're talking about separate gametophytes here. So the sperm of one gametophyte will swim over to the eggs of another non-genetically related gametophyte, and fertilization will occur. And again, fertilization, N plus N, is going to give us 2N. And that's going to lead to our next generation, the Sporophyte. And that's going to be it for a Pteridophyte life cycle.